However, there's always a however, right? However, you need to take into account everything else that's going on with your mosaic. So the glass tile I'll be talking about today is this 1-inch square glass tile, and it comes in some stunningly beautiful colors. That is some strong mesh. Woo. This is not light. I mean, it's not like, oh, it's so heavy, but wow. I love working with 1-inch glass tile. Between the gorgeous colors, and I mean the whites are super bright white, and how easy they are to cut and nip into whatever shape I want, they're a real treat to work with. Sometimes if you use something like meshed back mosaic, like the 1-inch, I keep pointing because I've got a whole sheet of them here, but if you use the established grout line, because these tiles are adhered to the mesh precisely, they've got a set width. Let's get to it. Welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Julie. And on this channel, we talk about tips, tricks, tools, adhesives, materials, and specific mosaic projects, all to shorten your learning curve when it comes to creating mosaic art. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. Prepping your tesserae for mosaic can sometimes be more intimidating than the actual tiling of your mosaic. And then once you learn how to prep, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I stressed about that. So if you've been around here on my channel for a little while, then you know I did a video on how I order and prep 3/4 inch glass tile. Now 3/4 inch glass tile are also commonly referred to as vitreous glass tile or Venetian glass tile. And to give you a little background for comparison, vitreous glass tile usually comes loose in a plastic bag or plastic packaging, or it comes glued to paper backing. So in the video I just referenced, I included some tips on how you can get the tiles off of the paper backing quickly, and also so that none of the paper backing comes off with your tiles. It can be kind of a pain in the butt. I'll include a link to that video down below in the description so you can check it out. You can access this information if you're on your desktop computer by clicking more under the video description. And if you're on your tablet or your smartphone, you can click more under the video title. So the glass tile I'll be talking about today is this 1-inch square glass tile, and it comes in some stunningly beautiful colors. And the color runs all the way through the entire tile, which means when you cut into it, the color continues, just like what you would find in 3/4 inch vitreous tile. So if you want to cut these tiles and lay them on their side instead of flat, for example, then the tesserae would look the same. They come in shiny or glossy, as well as matte and also textured finishes. They're 1/8 of an inch thick and break easily with wheeled glass nippers, or you can also use a glass cutter and running pliers. It's also important to note that these tiles are recycled glass, which is another feel-good benefit of this tesserae type. I'll link sources down below in the description for where I buy my glass tile from in case you're interested in experimenting and playing around. As far as price goes, they are more expensive than the vitreous glass tile, but the positive side to that is that you're getting a bigger tile compared to the vitreous glass. A little earlier I mentioned that they come in gorgeous colors, so I'm talking about solids, designs, and iridescent. So in today's video, I'll share how to prep 1-inch glass tile to use in your mosaic work. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. I love working with 1-inch glass tile. Between the gorgeous colors, and I mean the whites are super bright white, and how easy they are to cut and nip into whatever shape I want, they're a real treat to work with. Lately, I've been asked in the comments of my videos, how do you prep these glass tile for mosaics, especially when they come in sheet form? And you may be wondering, what do you mean by sheet form? Now, just like 3/4 inch glass tile, the 1-inch glass tile can also arrive in a plastic bag or plastic packaging, but it can also arrive glued to mesh. It's called fiberglass mesh or mosaic mesh, and it can arrive like that for installation purposes. but more so for architectural use. But it can also keep tiles safer and in good condition when being shipped like that. I like to keep my tiles glued to the mesh as well until I'm ready to use them. It allows me to maximize the space in my storage containers much better, and I also feel like I'm able to see what I have easier and quicker. They can also arrive not only adhered to Mosaic mesh, but then the tile and mesh can also be adhered to cardstock. Now these are often what tile manufacturers give to tile retailers and pool installation companies and interior designers. It gives the tiles more weight and makes them more attractive when sourcing materials for client projects. There's a few ways to use these glass tile when they arrive glued to the mesh. To begin with, if you don't want to use the glass tile adhered to the mesh, then they can easily be pulled off or cut away from the mesh. So in other words, if you just need one or a few squares to cut up and nip, then all you do is pull the tile from the mesh and you get to work on your mosaic. But when doing this, there are a couple things to keep in mind. Pulling the tessera off of the mesh gives you a tile that is the actual thickness of the tile, which is 1/8 of an inch thick. But something to look out for. When pulling tessera off of the mesh, some of the mesh fibers might stick to the back of the tile. That's okay, you can easily pull them off to reveal a bare glass tile. However, dun dun dun, if you cut a tile or a few tiles away from the sheet of mesh back tesserae and you don't pull off the mesh fibers from the back of the tile, then your tesserae is now thicker when you go to adhere it to your substrate. Does that make sense? It's now the thickness of the glass tile plus the mesh. Now you can certainly use your glass tile with the little mesh fibers attached to it on your mosaic, no problem, it's not going to hurt it. However, there's always a however, right? However, you need to take into account everything else that's going on with your mosaic. Specifically, the surface level or the height of your tesserae that's on your mosaic. So let me give you an example. If you're working with a mosaic and you've got a few different types of tesserae going on, let's say you've got stained glass, you've got vitreous glass, those are pretty thin tesserae. And then you add the glass tile to it, which is also pretty thin. They're all comparable in thickness. But you don't pull off the fibers from the back of the glass tile. All of a sudden, you've got different heights of your surface level of your mosaic. It may be slight, but if you want everything to be at the same level, you're going to need to take those fibers off, especially if you're using an adhesive like Weld Bond. Weld Bond is very thin. It's awesome, but it's very thin. It does not allow you to build up if you're using different thicknesses of tesserae. It's not like thin set or epoxy sculpt, which allow you some wiggle room as far as the thicknesses of your tesserae. So it's a little thing to think about, and you may be thinking, oh my gosh, these fibers are so thin. Yeah, but when you're already dealing with super thin tesserae and your adhesive is Weld Bond, which is, it's not water, but it's super thin, things like fiber are gonna make a difference. It's gonna add a little bulk to the underside of your tesserae. And whether you keep the mesh on or you take the mesh off, that doesn't matter. Your adhesive and your substrate and the tile, the tesserae, will all make contact. So you're not gonna have to worry about that. As long as you're using enough adhesive, you will make contact. It does get a little tricky when you are working on a curved surface, let's say, but that's for another video. But if you're working on a flat surface and you leave the fibers on, it's not going to hurt your mosaic. It's when you're dealing with other thin tesserae as well on your mosaic and you're wanting everything to be perfectly at the same level, that's when things get a little tricky, and you've just got to do what you can, whether that is removing the fiber on the back of the tile Or maybe you need to use a different adhesive and you're going to have to build up underneath the tesserae to get everything to the same level. Another thing to keep in mind, and stay with me on this, this is a universal thing. Whether you're using 1-inch square glass tile or some other mesh-backed glass or whatever tile, if you use more than one tessera from a mesh-backed sheet and you keep the tile attached to the mesh on your mosaic, you could use the grout line of the mesh tesserae as a guide for the rest of your mosaic. Now, you certainly don't have to do this, it's just an option. So sometimes when you're first starting out in mosaic and the grout line, establishing your grout line, is sometimes, well, you can get a little unsure. Is it too much? Are my tesserae too close? Are they too far apart? You know, you're still getting your feet under you. Sometimes if you use something like meshed back mosaic, like the 1-inch, I keep pointing because I've got a whole sheet of them here, but if you use the established grout line, because these tiles are adhered to the mesh precisely, they've got a set width of the grout line, but if you use them attached to the mesh, they are going to set you up for your grout line. Now, could you use a different width grout line for one part of your mosaic and the other? Of course, it's up to you. Because remember, you're the master of your mosaic. Whatever you want, you can have your different grout lines. You can have your different tesserae for that matter. Now, if you do use meshed back mosaics in your mosaic for part of your project, what you want to do is every so often, you just want to pull out a little square, let's say, of your mesh back tile onto your mosaic to make sure that you're keeping the grout line consistent if that's what you want. And while we're talking about adhering tesserae to substrates, as far as the adhesive is concerned, all of the usual suspects work really well with this recycled glass tile. I'm talking about white PVA glue like Weilbacher, cement-based adhesive like thin set mortar. You can even use epoxy sculpt, silicone, and even tile adhesive, which is also known as mastic. They all work really well with these glass tiles. And as far as grouting is concerned, no problem. Think of these tiles as stained glass or vitreous glass. It's pretty difficult to scratch the surface of these. Yes, it can be done, but you can use sanded grout, you can use non-sanded grout. It doesn't matter. And they clean up really nicely with grouting. Now, something to keep in mind, depending on which type of glass tile you get, the textured glass tile, those can be a little more frustrating to clean up when grouting, but still very doable. Just book in the time and the patience. Mentally get yourself prepared that it's just going to take a little more time, might be a little more frustrating, but you're going to get it clean. You're going to clean off all the grout and your mosaic is going to look great. I'll include a list down below in the description for the sources of where I purchase my glass tile from, in case you'd like to check it out. Is that good? Yeah? Let me give my foot rest because I'm a shorty. You can access this information if you're on your desktop Nope. No, easier said than done, Julie. You know, short, sweet, and to the point. Seriously? Aren't these gorgeous? Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Wow. That is some strong mesh. Woo. This is not light. I mean, it's not like, oh, it's so heavy, but wow. Wow. So pretty. We gotta start over because the ice maker keeps releasing the little ice cubes.
And a lot to cover, so let's get started. You go, girl.
No. I hope y'all are doing good. I do. I'm so glad you spent some time with me. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. and I'll see you soon. Love you guys. Bye. For more Mosaic inspiration, check out one of these two videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.